The Dirt with me, Mike Howell, an economics podcast where I present the down and dirty agronomic science to help grow crops and bottom lines. Inspired by eKonomics.com, farming's go-to informational resource, I'm here to break down the latest crop nutrition research, news, and issues, helping farmers make better business decisions through actionable insights. Let's dig in. Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome back to The Dirt. We're back with Ryan Christensen again this week. We were on location last week, and we're going to kind of continue that conversation this week. Ryan, welcome back. And if you will, just remind everybody a little bit about who you are and where you're located, what you do here.
Yeah, I'm a fifth-generation farmer. Our farm name is BKR Farms. I farm with my dad and brother, Bart and Kyle, and we're located in Grace, Idaho, which is a small little farming community on the southeast corner of the state, just north of the Utah-Idaho border. And we've been growing potatoes since the mid-'70s, but we've been growing small grains since the late 1800s.
Ryan, I've been to Idaho a few times, but I really got to drive around a little bit this time, and I really like what I see, really beautiful scenery. And driving in, I was kind of wondering, where in the world do they grow all the potatoes? And came over that last mountain, and it opened up into this beautiful valley, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe you get to see this every morning, wake up and see this. We did have a snow a day or two ago, and there's still snow covering everything, and it's just beautiful here.
Thank you. I really, that's the beautiful part, is coming into the valley over the Fish Creek Pass that you came across last night.
So Ryan, I thought we would, since we had you cornered here today, I thought we would go ahead and do another episode. We've had a great visit and talked about some things that you're doing here on the farm. And one thing that you pointed out was you don't pay a lot of attention to yield anymore. You're more concerned about return on investment. So I thought we would spend a few minutes today talking about the differences in between yield and return on investment. A lot of people think that farming is all about just making that high yield, doing everything we can to get those yields up. I often hear a lot of terms floating around about yield, things like the high yield or average yield or even optimum yield. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of yield and give our listeners that may not be as familiar with farming an idea of what we mean about some of these terms like average and optimum yields?
Yeah, grateful for the opportunity to talk about that. It's one of my favorite things, is to optimize your return on investment. So obviously we got to have yield. You've got to put a crop in the ground, you got to take care of it, and you've got to get it to produce the maximum amount you can on the other end. However, with the rising cost of inputs and everything's been going up for years, you've got to maximize your profit more than your yield, because there's ways that you can go out and put a huge amount of fertilizer or chemicals on your crop to protect it to get the highest yield possible. However, by the time you put a pencil to how much nitrogen or how much phosphorus or how much chemicals that's going to take, you've maximized your yield, but you've also burnt through your pocketbook. And it doesn't matter. The bank doesn't care what your yield number is. They care what money you're bringing in from that and what money is going out. And so I don't necessarily farm for yield anymore, because I farm for a return on investment. I look at every field and figure out, okay, this field is just not that good. It can do okay, but putting 100 pounds of nitrogen is not going to make it any better if I put 50 pounds of nitrogen. But the field up the road, it might do, if I put 150 pounds on, it might do well enough to make up for that extra 100 pounds of nitrogen. So I've really shifted our focus, my brother and I, Kyle, on our farm, of maximizing the return on investment. In our last episode, we talked about, conservation tillage, and we talked about some of our practices. The first couple of years, there was a minor drop in yield on certain fields. Some fields we didn't see it, but other fields we did. And when you're sitting in the combine and you're seeing that yield monitor telling you how many bushels or how many pounds, it's easy to get frustrated because it's a little less. But then when you put a pencil to it, well, I only had to go across that one time in my tractor to plant it. I didn't have to go across 3 times. So that saved me 5 gallons of fuel. I didn't have to go buy a bunch of digger points or, metal that wear out as you're tilling. And so by the time you put into that, it's okay that I was 5 or 6 bushels less because I wasn't putting in, 10 bushels worth of inputs just to cover fuel and metal costs. And so being able to look at the farming landscape in that sense really puts you at ease in knowing that you're farming for a profit. I mean, ultimately that's what it's about. Farming is a business, and if it's ran like a business, you're going to look at it and do what you can maximize your return on your investment rather than just cranking out the most. Like if you look at McDonald's or any of the burger places, they're the same way. They price their burgers at what they can do to send the most burgers out the door, but still get a profit. And so if they wanted to sell the most burgers, every burger would be 50 cents and they would be fine.
I would eat a lot more if they were 50 cents, but I probably don't need to eat anymore. But
Same.
Ryan, I'm do a lot more work out east than I do here in the western part of the United States, and I'm not as familiar out here. But through the Corn Belt and in the eastern states, every state it seems has a high yield contest for corn or soybeans or other crops, and even some of the national organizations have high yield contests, and some guys go out and win those contests every year, and they make phenomenal corn yields or soybean yields, and yeah, I see a benefit to that in some things, but one of my issues with some of those is nobody ever talks about how much money it costs to make that big a yield, and are they actually making a profit doing that? So what you're saying is that you could double your yields, but actually be losing money doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen those. Not the state of Idaho, not that I'm aware of, has any of those, but being part of the National Wheat Commission and different things, yeah, we get those in the mail all the time. And that's, to me, it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's a fun contest, but to do that on a grand scale would make a farmer go broke really, really quick.
So Ryan, we've kind of mentioned this return on investment a little bit. Talk a little bit more about what return on investment is and what it means. We know that it's a really important number, but why is that more important than the actual yield?
Well, like I said in the beginning, the return on investment's more important because it's what keeps your business going forward. It's what gives you a profit. So return on investment is for every dollar I'm going to invest into my farm or into your company or even to yourself as an individual, what am I going to get out of it in return? An example I would give is if I have stripe rust, that's a very common in the Midwest, but sometimes we get it here in our wheat, and I'll go out and scout it. And then I'll call my local chemical rep and say, okay, how much will it cost me to treat this for stripe rust? And he'll say, well, the chemical's about $10 an acre, and you're going to have to fly it on with a crop duster that's about $10 an acre, so that's $20. And so then I say, okay, price of wheat this year is only $4. Am I really going to get a 5 bushel bump, which on dry land, that's 10%. On irrigated, that's more like 3 or 4%. And then we can look at the numbers that we scout and be like, I'm not really sure I'll get a 5 bushel bump. So let's not do it. Now, the very next year, we could have stripe rust and grain might be worth $9 and be like, well, I could get a 2 bushel bump. So let's go ahead and spray for stripe rust and take care of that pest so that we can get the 2 bushel bump. And so that's how I look at it on all my crops. That's just a real simple one to look at is, am I going to get the dollar spent? Is it going to give me the yield that I need to cover not only the cost of the chemical, but enough to merit that cost?
Ryan, you talked about the conservation tillage and how that's helping improve your ROI. You talked about the savings of going across the field and investing in the steel that's just going to wear out. Are there other things that you're doing here on the farm that you think some practices that are increasing your ROI?
So my changing up the way I fertilize. So when I fertilize, how I fertilize, what I fertilize with. I use different fertilizers. I use more of like a polymer coated urea on my potatoes, and I do it up front so that it's more of a slow release throughout the season. It's more expensive you're looking in our valley 20 to 30% more, but I easily make that back on potatoes. And when I've done that on our small grains in this area, it doesn't pencil out. It doesn't give us that 20 to 30% bump. So I use a cheaper source on certain grains and different timings. So that's another way I look at return on investment. With the water savings, the water's not free. I'm either paying a power bill to pull it up out of the ground, or I'm paying a power bill to pull it out of the canal, the irrigation canals. And so by reducing that, some systems are 20 to 30% reduction in power savings because of being able to save and conserve water. And so those are probably the two biggest that we've seen.
So Ryan, some of these ROI calculations are pretty simple. You know how much the input's going to cost. You know pretty much what your yield advantage is going to be, and you can figure that number pretty easy. Sometimes it gets a lot harder. I mean, if you're looking at multiple inputs at the same time, one plus one may equal three, or one plus one may equal zero. How do you figure your ROI in some of these more complicated systems, and how do you account for things like quality of life and time savings and being able to spend more time with the family and things like that?
So to answer the first question of the complexities of the different inputs, I use computer software that links in with my different GPS systems, gathering data. I believe that if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. And so the different softwares that I use then bring all the difference in the information in from like John Deere Ops Center or Climate Field View or different things like that. And then it's able to layer it and give me like a zone economics. So I can see what my return on investment is based on all of my inputs instead of just one. So using technology, using softwares out there is very important to take the complexity out of that. The second part, family, spending time with family is huge. That's my hobbies with my family is we love watching movies, we love traveling. Without the sacrifice of my wife and children, I wouldn't be able to do what I do on the farm. And so I want to spend as much time with them as I can, but obviously farming is very time heavy for a majority of the year. And so we invest in a lot of things that some may on the outside look like, well, that's kind of useless or wasteful. For example, all of my irrigation systems I can control on my phone. It was very expensive to put those systems on, but prior to that, I'd get up at 5:30 and I'd have to get in my truck and spend an hour making a drive around. And if anything was wrong, I'd stop and fix it. And if everything was going, by then it's like, oh, it's too late to really go home and have breakfast or anything, so I'll just stay out to work. Same thing at night before coming home, finish work at 6 and do that same hour drive. Now I can run to Pocatello to a grocery store with my family, or I can go to a movie and be notified as we're leaving the movie that something is stopped or something is broke down. Same thing with my tractors. I can send guys out to do work, and I can be monitoring them instead of having to drive out and wonder how close they are to finishing. And so those are things that, yes, it's expensive, and it doesn't directly affect my ROI to the bank account, but it affects my ROI to my family, which is very important to me.
Ryan, you talked about ROI and yield, and how you're not shooting so much for the highest yield, but you're looking for the highest ROI. I know a lot of farmers still have to have that high yield, and they want to go to the coffee shop and brag about it. How do you deal with your neighbors when you go to the coffee shop or the local cafe, and everybody's bragging about their yields, and they may be a little higher yielding than you are?
Well, in the previous episode, I talked about the hindrance of conservative tillage and getting over that beauty contest mentality. Same thing has to apply to ROI. I just, smile, and it doesn't bother me in the least because my neighbors aren't paying my bills and I'm not paying theirs. So if that's what they're focused on, then that's theirs. But then I just focus on what I can control and what I can do. And I just, for me personally, it's between me and my family, and I just don't let it bother me.
So Ryan, we've talked a lot about yield and ROI. Is there anything else we need to talk about before we end this subject and move on to something else?
I just think it's important to change that mentality. Everything is changing so rapidly, if not by the day, in the world, on world economies. And so if we're not willing to change with it, then if we're only going after yield, those type of farms may not be around if they're not willing to adapt and to focus on different things other than just high yield.
Well, Ryan, once again, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us and record this other episode. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you'll hang around for just a couple of moments, we'll be right back with segment 2. Farming isn't farming without questions. And now there's a place to go for answers. At eKonomics, an entire team of agronomists is waiting and ready to help for free. No question is too big or too small. Visit Nutrien-economics.com and submit your question with the Ask an Agronomist feature. Well, listeners, welcome back for segment 2. As you know, this year, segment 2 has been devoted to an Ask an Agronomist question. We're kind of changing that up for this final episode of the year. If you've been listening for very long, you know each year we end our season at Thanksgiving, and we've always done a special Thanksgiving episode. To kind of continue that tradition, I thought it would be great, since we have Ryan here with us today, to get his perspective on Thanksgiving as a farmer. So, Ryan, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about Thanksgiving, and if you will, just tell us a little bit what Thanksgiving means to you as a farmer.
Thanksgiving is one of the most important holidays of the year for me, outside of Christmas and Easter, because it gives me a chance to really think about what I've been blessed with throughout the year. I truly believe that the things that I'm able to accomplish wasn't because of me. It was because of the giants who came before me, ancestors who left Denmark and other parts of Europe to come here to this valley and break it out of sagebrush, but then also the sacrifices that are made within the walls of my own home that we're sitting in, the sacrifices that my wife makes, Andrea makes on a daily basis to kind of be a single mom for several months of the year as I'm planting or I'm harvesting. But then so very grateful for my kids too, and their understanding of the different times of the year and the opportunity that my kids have to come and work with me. Potato harvest especially, my 16-year-old daughter is driving a tractor right alongside me, and that just makes me so grateful. And Thanksgiving is a time, and then when we're done in the fields, we still have to go unload those trucks at the storages, and then I get to go and see my other 2 kids who've been standing there in the dust and the heat and the cold and the rain, and still have a smile on their face as they've been cleaning the potatoes, pulling the rotten ones out or the rocks. And so that's something that I'm grateful for, and most thankful for my God and Heavenly Father, who's blessed us with this opportunity to farm and to take stewardship of His creations that He's given us.
Ryan, Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays as well. Growing up, I didn't live really close to my grandparents, and we didn't get to go see them all that often. But Thanksgiving, everything shut down, and we were going to the grandparents' house for Thanksgiving, and got a lot of fond memories there. So, if you don't mind, take just a few minutes and talk about what Thanksgiving's like here at the Christensen home. Are there any special traditions, any special foods, any fond memories?
So growing up, it was a great memory to go visit my grandparents that lived in Utah. That's where my mom was from. And Christmas was always spent here on the farm, but Thanksgiving was spent visiting my grandparents in Utah, and that was always really special to see those other cousins. And then as we got older, it became just here, as grandparents age and pass away. But then as my wife and I started a family, we kind of split Thanksgiving, one time here in Idaho and one time in Utah. And I've always loved it. I've loved the stress-free time of Thanksgiving, of just being able to, do some cooking and then show up and eat is always great experience. In recent years, we've had the opportunity to travel over Thanksgiving because of keeping our kids out of school. You can maximize the days you're gone if you take some of the school days that they're out on Thanksgiving. So, we've had Thanksgiving in other parts of the world, and it's been just as special because we get to show our kids what blessings they have of being where they've been able to grow up and to be with and to see. And then even when we get back, we still have our traditional Thanksgiving dinner. Sometimes it's before and sometimes it's after, but it always includes the turkey and never without Idaho-grown mashed potatoes and gravy.
So, Ron, that kind of leads me to my next question. How many ways will potatoes be prepared and be on the table Thanksgiving Day?
Usually Thanksgiving it's just once, and that's just the mashed potatoes. But it's because the rest of the year, we have them in all sorts of ways. There's so many ways you can have a potato that I couldn't even begin to count the ways we've ate potatoes in our house.
Yeah, well, we eat potatoes pretty regular at my house as well. But growing up, I would not sit down at the table if my mom didn't have potatoes in some form or some fashion. And I'm still that way today. Ryan, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with about Thanksgiving before we wrap this episode up?
I'm just grateful for your listeners, that these opportunities to listen to podcasts and shows us that there's people out there who are willing to learn about farming and agriculture and how we are trying to just feed the world. And so I'm grateful for your listeners and the opportunity to be on this podcast.
Well, Ryan, we really appreciate it. Listeners, as you know, this is our last episode for the season. We'll be back the first Tuesday in March. Ryan said it, that he was grateful for the listeners. I'm grateful for the listeners as well. We've got a lot of people behind the scenes that help put this podcast on every week. We couldn't do this without everybody behind the scenes. I can't do this on my own. I really appreciate everybody doing that. But I really appreciate y'all tuning in every week. And this is going to wrap it up for this year. As we're signing off, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Be back with us the first Tuesday in March as we come back with some more exciting episodes for you. Until next time, this has been Mike Howell with The Dirt. Hey guys, if you like what you heard today, do us a favor and share this podcast with someone else. It could be your neighbor, your friend, your crop advisor, or whoever you think would enjoy it. Your support helps ensure future episodes, so please like, subscribe, share, and rate the show wherever you're listening from.